Hello and welcome to Antinatalism this week. Third speaker for the Antinatalist Advocacy Conference 2025 was announced this week, and that is Magnus Vinding. He is the author of several books, including Suffering Focused Ethics, and also has an upcoming book, Compassionate Purpose. I personally came to know about Magnus Vinding through the book The Speciesism of Leaving Nature Alone and the Theoretical Case for Wildlife Antinatalism back in 2017. He has also written several books related to ethics and is the co-founder of the Center for Reducing Suffering. His website magnusvinding.com says he co-founded the Center for Reducing Suffering, whose mission is to reduce severe suffering. Taking all sentient beings into account, we develop ethical views that give priority to suffering and research how to best reduce suffering. Last week, we covered Bri Lee's article on ABC Australia, her new book called Seed, with its main character being an antinatalist, and her book tour across Australian cities. This week, there's an article by Bri Lee in The Guardian talking highly about antinatalism. I wanted to know if having a kid on a burning planet was right. I found that antinatalism is seriously taboo. So, from the title itself, we get the hint that her flavor of antinatalism is more towards ecological side. It's a short article, yet it covers some very important points. She explains why she stumbled on the subject to start with. She was in her 30s and had to make a decision on whether or not to have children. At the start, she thought antinatalists would be losers and edgelords, or 14-year-olds who have just discovered Nietzsche. But when she looked further into it seriously, she found that antinatalism was a complex and rich web of ideas, some contradictory and some complementary, but all based on compassion. She also found that, like any other isms, antinatalists are not a monolith. They have a diversity of opinions, but they share the underlying desire to reduce suffering, to minimize harm and hurt. That's why she made the protagonist of her book, Seed, an antinatalist. She also differentiates antinatalism from child freedom and those who are undecided on having children. Our society has come a long way in making space for things such as maternal ambivalence and the child free movement, but those are still frameworks that ask whether or not we want to have children, not whether or not we should. Bri also recognizes that we live in a strong pronatalist society, but there's an asymmetry between pronatalists and antinatalists. What's so strange about antinatalism being taboo is that pronatalism is skyrocketing in mainstream prevalence. And whereas antinatalists seek only to convince, pronatalists seek to legislate. And that's true. You just have to look at what's happening in America, what's happening in Russia and other countries. There are many countries which are trying to increase fertility by giving parents money. Donald Trump has proudly declared himself as the fertilization president and is for passing legislation which will help people have more children. And although she does not say this in the article, we all know what's happening in Russia, where there are laws against child free people. And this seems to be bleeding into the so called liberal world as well. Take France, for example. There was recently a news in the Times that President Macron fears that the anti child movement is a threat to the future. And so the government wants to fight back against the rise of child free zones. That news article is behind the paywall, so I couldn't read it fully, but we get the gist. Antinatalists, on the other hand, spend a lot of energy explaining why their position is on the moral ground and not a legal compulsion. Most antinatalists, in fact, would oppose antinatalist government policies like China's one-child policy or India's forced sterilization that happened in 1970s. So thanks again to Bri Lee for writing such an article and bringing very important points with regards to antinatalism and pronatalism in a mainstream newspaper like The Guardian. And there is more news about Bri Lee. Fashionjournal.com.au published an interview of Bri where we come to know that she actually traveled to Antarctica in the process of writing this book called Seed. That's because the story of the book involves a seed vault in Antarctica. I went on a ship for a month in February 2023. It changed my life. There was no way I could have written this book without actually going going to Antarctica. The interview also has a reference to Bri's website, News and Reviews, which has live streams that Bri does, as well as podcasts and other content that she produces. The website is dedicated to reviews of different books, not necessarily those just on antinatalism, and she's also planning to start a newsletter about it.
Sentientism leads very directly to veganism, and part of the implication there is that when we look at animal agriculture, yes, there's the horror of the slaughterhouses, and yes, there's the horror of their, the mutilations and the family separation and the exploitative practices and the constraints and the all of the stuff that goes on. But the core of the problem is the breeding into existence of those beings so that they can be exploited in the future.
That was Jamie Woodhouse talking to Lawrence about the connection between sentientism and antinatalism. Sentientism, according to Wikipedia, is an ethical view that places sentient individuals at the center of moral concern. In other words, the criteria of whether someone is eligible for moral consideration is whether or not they are sentient. Sentience here means someone who can feel pleasure or pain or have some kinds of feelings, and that someone would be a sentient being. Only those beings who are sentient are eligible for our moral consideration on this worldview. And that's because by definition they can suffer, whereas beings like plants or things like stones won't come under this umbrella of sentient beings. So you might ask, what has this to do with antinatalism? And that was the main subject, I thought, of this new interview/podcast on Lawrence's channel of Jamie Woodhouse. Jamie is the creator of Sentientism YouTube channel, where he interviews many different philosophers. I myself follow that channel and Jamie Woodhouse. He has produced philosophically dense content which is very, very valuable. His Facebook group Sentientism has more than 2,000 followers, and his website sentientism.info has all the information about sentientism. In this particular episode, Lawrence and Jamie go through what sentientism actually means, what are its different shades and implications, what is its relationship to veganism, and then the main point, what is its relationship to antinatalism. And as we saw in the clip, Jamie was explaining that when you are talking about sentientism, which is primarily the view about sentient beings which are already existing, it also concerns with creation of those sentient beings, which means breeding of animals and reproduction of humans. So it was a nice podcast, more than an hour long, but fully entertaining at every section. So thanks to Lawrence and Jamie for doing this. Speaking of Lawrence, he was featured on a Swedish television channel, SVT, and he was not like a passing mention on antinatalism, but he was the main antinatalist person in that piece that SVT published. Antinatalist, it is morally wrong to have children, is the title of the article, and the header has a trailer of 46 seconds entirely of Lawrence. You burden someone with significant suffering by bringing them into the world, says Lawrence in the article. At the end of the article, there's a 29-minute podcast where they discuss the topic of having children in Swedish language. And Lawrence features at about 26th minute mark. Only that part where Lawrence speaks is in English. The rest of it is in Swedish. So if anyone happens to know the language, please let me know what the rest of the podcast discusses. This SVT television channel was founded in 1956 and as per Wikipedia is still the biggest television network in Sweden. So congratulations to Lawrence for appearing on such a mainstream channel in Sweden. Mjonsky Theatre published a new zine, fourth in the series of the zines that they have published so far. This one is on the 3 ways to protect your children. First is avoid posting photos and videos of your children on social media. Well, that's simple to understand. Children cannot give an informed consent of whether they are okay with it or not, and it is risky to put those things on social media anyway. The second is avoid forcing children to eat animals and their secretions and lying about where those products come from. And third, and the most important, is really to protect your children. Don't bring them here in the first place. The only guaranteed way to protect children from harm is to not bring them into existence. They also offer advice to those who have already had biological children. And now on to some pronatalism this week. There was an article about the ProNatalist Paradoxes by Kyle Munkitrick. The article points out the two factions of today's pronatalists, mainly in the US. One is the social conservatives who want to follow tradition mainly of Christianity and who want people to have more children. And the other is the Silicon Valley technological weirdos. Weirdos is a word in the article, not my word. They are actually opposing factions. On the surface, it looks like they are together because both of them want to increase fertility rate and want people to have more children. But apart from that, they have little in common. For example, social conservatives want people to have more children, but they also want those children to be born in a certain way. Those children should be part of a family, preferably of straight father and a mother, and they have certain views about how the society should be structured with family as a unit. They also base their worldview generally on some kind of religion. In the US, it is primarily Christianity, and so they would be against technologies like IVF or gene selection or gene editing or even worse, artificial wombs. They think children are gifts and we should accept them as they are given to us by the God. That is their conception of unconditional love. On the other hand, the Silicon Valley bros, or weirdos as the article calls it, don't care much about the structure of our society or family being its unit. The poster child of this faction is Elon Musk, who has had at least 14 children from 5 different women, and many, if not all of them, are through IVF. Silicon Valley tech bros are okay with IVF, they are okay with gene selection or even gene editing. They don't view children as gifts, rather they think of children as a means to their techno-utopian goals. In the eyes of social conservatives, these Silicon Valley technology bros think of children as commodities. From the point of view of Silicon Valley guys, social conservatives are backward, causing more suffering. But weirdly enough, these two groups seem to come together to promote the propaganda of pronatalism. The conservatives and weirdos not only almost perfectly oppose and cancel out each other, but are also tying their own rhetorical shoelaces together. Speaking of such paradoxes, there was a news in BBC that scientists have made embryos from human skin DNA for the first time. In normal human reproduction, what happens is there is a sperm and an egg. Sperm carries half of the genes of father and the egg carries half of the genes of mother. And when the two fuse, you get the full set of the genes for a new animal. In this new technology, what they have done is they have taken a donor egg and removed its original DNA. Then they took a skin cell, took its DNA out and injected that into the donor egg. Then they processed the egg such that it sheds off half of the DNA sequence which it received from the skin cell. And then they took a sperm to fertilize that egg which housed DNA from the skin. And even though they used the skin cell, technically any cell from parent's body could be used. The technology is experimental and probably will take another decade to commercialize it. But if it is done, then it will help even same-sex couples to have genetically related children, meaning the child would receive half of their genes from one father, let's say, and half from another father. Now, even though BBC article doesn't mention this, there is a paradox you can already see. How would religious people view this technology? Those social conservatives who are against, let's say, same-sex reproduction, how would they view this? And how would the tech bros see this? A channel called The Bituation Room, with almost 230,000 subscribers, made a video about the creeps of the pronatalist movement. It's a well-researched video which covers Elon Musk, the Collins couple, Kevin Dolan, who was the organizer of the Natal Conference, other speakers at the Natal Conference, including women who spoke at that conference, and then politicians like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and their pronatalist attitudes, exposing the racist and misogynist undertones of this movement. The anchor Francesca has had one child, so I don't think she is an antinatalist, but she exposes these creeps in the pronatalist movement very nicely. And it's a funny video to watch. She does it in a very entertaining way, using lots of jokes, caricature, satire, and sarcasm. If she does a similar video on antinatalism with jokes about antinatalists, would I like it? I don't know. Maybe I might try to distinguish between the comic parts and the serious arguments, which is something we can do with this video of hers about the pronatalist creeps as well. What she's saying is serious. The arguments are valid. Her comic part is just entertainment. And so it is enjoyable to watch. I highly recommend it to anyone, whether you are an antinatalist or not. This nicely segues into other notable videos that I watched this week. Conundrum made a short 4-minute video talking talking about creation of new life as a result of the beautiful romantic attraction between men and women. He starts with some horrible things that men are ready to do to get the love of women. It's a nice little video showing the contradiction between the beautiful romantic love, creation of life, and the resultant suffering and destruction. Another such notable video was by Marwadi Dinesh on antinatalism in Hindi. This is just a cursory introduction to antinatalism in Hindi, nothing too deeply philosophical nor very systematic. All his arguments are philanthropic and about imposition on the human child, so nothing new if you're already familiar with antinatalism. But if you're not, and also you prefer the content in Hindi, then this can act as a good starting point. It is good to see that young people from a relatively poor country like India are starting to realize antinatalism for what it is. A relatively nascent channel, The Child Choice, made a 50-minute long video on David Benatar's axiological asymmetry. He covers the asymmetry in detail and some other arguments like risk arguments, for example, as well as criticisms of the asymmetry. It's a nice video to watch which goes deep into the aspects of axiological asymmetry. And finally, on a channel called Psyche Talk was an hour and a half long discussion on antinatalism in Bangla language. The channel itself has more than 33,000 subscribers, and the video was a podcast/discussion between two young men. I don't know if it was in India or Bangladesh, but somewhere in Bangla speaking world is what I would assume. And looking at the translated subtitles, they seem to talk about philosophical arguments for antinatalism. The asymmetry, David Benatar, Schopenhauer, all those arguments. So very nice to see that antinatalist content is being produced in so many different languages.